Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody inside and outside the ballpark to the Noved Notes podcast. We're currently on episode 77 of the podcast. I'm your host, NovedPlayer, and with me today, I have one of the amazing Avatar PvP communities. We have the Ashen Empire. We have Jason. Jason, welcome to the podcast. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, of course. So, first and foremost, for the general listening audience at home, what exactly do you do inside of VR chat?
So, my group is an Avatar PvP group. We use one of GoFluff's prefab. He was on a previous episode here. And we make avatars based on Star Wars theme, like the one I'm wearing currently, as well as a lot of models ported from Star Wars games. We make them all PvP accessible. And we basically just fight each other to the death and death matches and team games.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I guess one of the very first questions I want to ask, because obviously, you're based on the Star Wars, universe per se. So I was going to say, what exactly made you want to create the Ashen Empire? Like what kind of started that?
So, for Star Wars, I've always been a big fan of it. It's come from my parents. My dad named me after a character from the series. So it's always been a part of who I am. And then when I first started VR chat, I used to roam worlds. I didn't really know there was a Star Wars scene in VR chat. And I think it was one day I was chilling inside of a black cat and a bunch of people with stormtrooper costumes come running in. And they ask, "Oh, do you want to join our Star Wars group?" And then after that, I just sort of realized, oh, there's stuff that can be made here. And I learned how to make models, and the rest is just history.
No, fair. And obviously, with VR chat in Star Wars, obviously there's a lot when it comes to, different role plays and, different, events inside of VR chat. So it's kind of cool to hear that you got kind of recruited into, doing it via, just being in VR chat. That's cool. So I guess, kind of to ask, what kind of got you into VR chat in the first place?
Surprisingly enough, it was Beat Saber. I saw a bunch of VR videos of people playing Beat Saber, and I thought, I should get a VR because lightsabers and cutting blocks, that's so awesome. And once I got my Quest, I saw VR chat as an app on there that was free, and I thought, oh, well, it's free, can't hurt checking it out. And I downloaded it, and for about half a year after that, I just kept on roaming around there. Interestingly enough, when I first got my headset, I got the original Quest back when they were still called Oculus. It was I nearly accidentally got the Rift, and that would have been terrible for me because I'm only just got a PC now. That would have been a devastation to my entire VR career.
Yeah, it definitely has changed over the years, to say the least. But yeah, no, that's what's up. Obviously a lot of people play Beat Saber as well, and there's a lot of opportunities to learn about VR chat, because of especially with Meta, well, it used to be Oculus, but now Meta, kind of pushing it on the front page and everything, and all that type of stuff. So it's really cool to kind of hear that's how you got started. Going kind of down the timeline a little bit, I guess I should first ask, so what you said you started with Beat Saber, so when roughly did you start with VR chat?
I believe it was I got my headset in the winter of 2019. So VR chat was I got it just after there, but I really got into the game when I got recruited into my first group, which was July 2020. So just after lockdown had hit, I was stuck indoors. I had nothing to do, and I needed to find a way to socialize. I'm pretty introverted, but I thought, oh, it's talking to people online won't be that bad. Might as well do it rather than go outside.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously, with the pandemic being a big hit to society and a lot of people going to either VR or Animal Crossing, I always make the joke, like during that, it was either one or the other. You either played Animal Crossing or you played VR or both. There was no other big things around that time. But yeah, no, I mean, that's amazing that, you've been around for a while. So obviously, you know, you getting recruited into the Star Wars community, what kind of made you want to like, create your own community? Like what kind of drove you to make the Ashen Empire?
So it was a really long time ago. I was in this server that I was a part of, and I thought, oh, I might as well commission myself a custom model. And that's usually how most avatar creators start. They think, oh, I'll get someone to make me a model. I saw it and I thought, oh, I can make changes to this, but I didn't want to bug the person who had made it. So I thought, oh, I'll learn how to do it myself. And so I made my first avatars, and they were really shoddy at first. I think it was before the SDK3 had even released, so all of the toggles were gesture toggles, and you had 8 toggle slots in your wheel that were just refurbished emotes. And it wasn't until past SDK3 released, I saw that there was a PvP system made by Fluff, and I think at the time it was the one made by Snipeslow. He made an Udon version of it, which somehow worked for Quest, which was what I was on at that point. I thought, oh, I'll use that, and then I can make avatars with cool special powers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because there's a lot of systems when it comes to PvP stuff. Obviously, Fluff's being like one of the bigger ones that's known across VR chat. But yeah, no, I mean it is cool to hear that you found a system that worked for you and with the Quest people. Yeah, sorry, Questies. A lot of it's gonna be PC related matters now, but but it definitely is amazing what these creators can do when it comes to these systems. Because without these systems, a lot of it would just be role playing at the end of the day. It's not forced contact. Granted, latency is always going to be a pain, but at least with those systems, it's somewhat more accurate than assuming you got hit or whatever the case may be. Yeah, but yeah, I was gonna say, because obviously, kind of to dive back into the original question a little bit. So when you created this community, so what kind of made you want to go with the Ashen Empire? Like, what kind of started that specifically?
So it was mostly just I had a bunch of avatars that I'd made for an older group that were all PvP, and I thought, well, I want to make some new ones because I've learned this was just about when contacts were coming out, and I had made a system on my avatars where if you put 2 contacts from 2 separate avatars together, it would be a system in the game where you can't hit and kill your teammates, and it puts like a little Sims diamond above your head. And I thought, well, I can update all of my old avatars, but there's nobody to use them. I thought, well, I've got all of these people that I've met over the years. What if I make a group where they can all use these avatars that I've made, use prefabs that I've made, and I can teach them to do the same that I do. But in the same time, we can all have fun shooting each other.
Yeah, no, that's valid. I would say that I feel like that's a lot of PvP communities. They just like shooting each other, or kill. I'm not gonna say that. Hurting each other. Smile. Got to keep it TOS friendly. But fuck it. But it's one of those things that like I feel like a lot of PvP communities share that aspect. They just like having fun, just absolutely destroying each other in one way, shape, or another. So, I guess kind of to, go into that. So obviously, you learned about the PvP systems, you started to make, modifications for your own stuff as well. So I guess one of the questions I want to ask, when it comes to the community itself, what was it like to kind of start it? Like what was kind of the process of going through, you talked about having some of your friends join in and stuff, but like, tell me the process in your mindset of like how the community had started. Like how did you start growing your community?
So the first thing I wanted to make sure that there was avatars and worlds ready for it, because a lot of the groups I see start up don't have avatars or don't have worlds, and they'll use stuff made by other creators. And you'll tend to get they overpromise and then underdeliver, and that ends up with people leaving. I wanted to have that all sorted first as a foundation before I then build it up over time. The second thing I did is I wanted to find some people that I could depend on to help me run it. At the moment, I have 15 or so people that help me run events. A lot of them I can depend on. At the moment, I have actually sent my index in for an RMA, and they're running all of the events for me at the moment. I'm lucky enough to have my Quest headset to connect to my computer, but it wouldn't handle an event. But they're all running it for me. They're doing an amazing job. I'd have to give a shout out to both of the two other owners of my server, which is my Shock Trooper Commander Jaina and my Death Trooper Captain Timber. They both have helped me with all sorts of stuff. Jaina helps make promotional videos for the server. Timber's made quite a lot of posters. He's put in our, it was in our booth in Project. There was a little slideshow, and all of the posters on there were made by him. He's a pretty good photographer. Jaina's really good at making videos. And the rest are really good at running events, making sure everyone's having a fun time.
Oh, hell yeah. I was going to say, because obviously, doing what you guys do, obviously, it's a lot of work at the end of the day, especially, with you being, categorized as an Avatar PvP community, because you're also, you're working, maybe with other communities, or, you're having events, fighting other communities, whatever the case may be. So obviously there's a lot of planning and a lot of, extroverted, activity going on in that case. So I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask, because obviously, with you guys being an Avatar PvP community, what are some of the communities that you guys have like faced against, or have you had any like collaboration events with like other PvP communities?
So far, we've had a few events with Ashen Empire group run by someone I know called the Jokester. It's pretty good. Obviously, we are a quest group, and that is a very, very rare within the PvP community, because a lot of the stuff that you can do with PvP avatars is on PC. I like to push the limits with how much I can make while still keeping it available to everyone. But we do have PvP events with groups on other platforms. And so far that has just been the Sith Empire, but we do hope to do events with other groups eventually.
No, yeah, of course. I mean, hopefully, down the line, I guess that's always, I guess this is a good question to ask, because obviously with the Quest headsets, right? With the Quest 2, kind of not being sold anymore, it's all about the Quest 3, the Quest 3S, and the Pro. Well, not even the Pro anymore, realistically, but mainly the Quest 3 and Quest 3S. And I know, if I saw correctly, there was an article about a rumored Quest 4. I'm not sure how accurate it is, so don't quote me on that. I saw an article somewhere. It may have been on social media, or it just popped up in my feed on Google, whatever. But yeah, I guess, kind of one of the questions I want to ask, do you personally think there's gonna be a point to where, it's going to be more like the Quest headsets are going to be more powerful enough to, kind of appease towards where PC is? Do you think that's like, or I guess, let me rephrase the question, I guess, to make things a little clearer. Do you think at some point, it's going to get to a point where PC is going to start becoming more popularized, and, Quest might become deprecated? I guess I kind of want, as a Quest PvP community, I kind of want your, thoughts and, opinions on it, just out of curiosity.
So my main thought is that most of the assets on VR chat are from video games or from booth models, and a lot of them are very unoptimized. But the technology that are in the headsets is improving every day, and I think there's going to come to a point where Quest and PC will have the same limits. Obviously, other than shaders like Poyomi that would probably not work at all on Quest. But when it comes to stuff like world constraints were recently re-added on Quest, as well as aim constraints, stuff like that. I use that to... I've finally made my guns two-handed on my models, so you can hold them, and I made a minigun that only shoots when you're holding it with both hands. But I think it's the fact that stuff from PC is slowly moving over to Quest, and there's Quest versions for most stuff that you can do on PC now that the only thing that's holding it back at the moment is the VR chat limits for what they put for Quest avatars. And obviously those limits need to be put there for a reason, because if you have any avatars too bad, it's gonna damage someone's headset, and you don't want that. But as soon as the technology gets better, maybe one or two headsets down the line, they'll have the computing power necessary to run that sort of stuff. And I think most recently they made a tune shader for Quest called Tune Standard, I believe, and that's a watered down version of Poyomi, but it still works and it's close to PC now.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I do agree with you, because the chipsets are always improving. Obviously with Quest 2 to Quest 3, it was a huge difference with chipsets. It's definitely a lot more visually appealing in comparison. Yes, it still uses the Quest limits that VRChat has in place, if I recall, but overall, it's still, at least from my personal opinion, because I've had both, it's definitely a massive improvement for a lot of quality of life stuff. Like in general, not just VR chat, but just in VR in general. I believe it's editor put it up on the screen. I want to say it's like I think it's called the Snapdragon 2 or 3. Just put it right here. But it's definitely the chipset. I mean, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure that's it though. But
Pretty sure it's like the Snapdragon XR2 or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. But it's definitely a massive improvement from the Quest 2 into the Quest 3. It definitely handles a lot better in comparison to the Quest 2, because I mean Quest 2 is, oh god, it's old. It's getting up there in age. But
it came out 2020. That's 5 years ago.
Roughly,
really?
Yeah.
October, I think it was.
Something like that, yeah. I would say that sounds about right. If not, it was 2019.
That's right when they released Saints and Sinners on Quest, the big old zombie game, and I thought, oh, I'll get a Quest 2. I get to play The Walking Dead with it.
Yeah, it's definitely a crazy thing, but kind of go back more into relevant topics. But because obviously, with your guys' events, being Quest compatible, doing all the worlds, doing all the avatars. So, I guess kind of to better explain the community side a little bit for maybe those who are not familiar. So, what exactly, are some of the avatars or some of the characters that you guys portray when it comes to your roleplay events or your PvP events? Excuse me. I just scheduled a roleplay podcast episode way later down the line, so I just blah. but yeah, just kind of go into some of the stuff.
So we portray, if you've ever seen Star Wars, the original 3 movies, you've got the big bad Galactic Empire, the guys who we betray. It's mostly we just have our own sort of thing. So there was I think 2, maybe 3 games released by EA about a Jedi called Cal Kestis, and there are these troopers that hunt him down called Purge Troopers, and they have these big staffs made of electric. That's one of the ones that we have. The other one we have is like this airborne drop squad, and they have a gunship that can fly around, which is also Avatar PvP compatible and on Quest. So they have their gunship that flies around, and they can drop out of the air and start shooting their enemies. We have a heavy weapons battalion. They have mortars, they have flamethrowers, and they have miniguns, so they'll be the ones that you want to stand behind. And then we have the Death Troopers, which are sort of jack of all trades. They have a customizable loadout. They can put different attachments on their guns. They can overcharge them to shoot faster. And then you have the Inquisitors, which is what I'm currently wearing. It's force powers. They can shoot lightning out of their hands, or they can push their enemies up into the air before pulling them back down. Just anything I can make with Avatar PvP. If I have an idea to make something cool, I'm going to test it, and I'm going to see what I can make with it.
No, fair enough. I mean, obviously there's a lot of characters when it comes to, Star Wars and stuff, so it's definitely interesting to see how a lot of people do it in their own perspective way. So kind of to, kind of go into more specifics with your community. So, what are some examples of some of the guys' events you guys have held?
So some that we do hold, one that I'm interested in is there's two that I'd technically say are Halloweenish events. We have an Ewok hunt, which is you have these little teddy bears with spears and like bowlers, and they're running around this dark forest chasing a bunch of people in the regular troop avatar. And it's like an infection from the old Halo games, where if you die, you join them. At the moment, I'm working on updating them. I've figured out a new way to do my team system where you don't have to like fist bump another person to team them, and you can have all that be automatic. So at the moment, I'm making it so that the stormtroopers can't hurt each other and that the Ewoks can't hurt each other. So then it's completely team based. And then at the end of the Ewok Hunt events, after about 10 minutes of surviving, you'll have a gunship fly in from the top of the map to come rescue these stormtroopers who are fighting for their lives. I'd say the other one that we have is Blackwing, and that's zombies. So it's a dark ship with no lights on. I think I got the model from it from the Old Republic Commando games. It's completely pitch black. You've got the flashlights on your guns to see other people. And because the zombies look exactly like your teammates, you have to make sure not to accidentally shoot your friends. And it's basically a game of can you survive without everyone dying within a certain time limit.
No, fair. I mean, yeah, there's definitely a lot of I guess there's a lot of memery when it comes to like, team kills and stuff. So it is kind of cool to hear that you have a system in play when it comes to, dealing with that and stuff. I guess kind of one of the questions, because obviously, there's a lot of shenanigans when it comes to that type of stuff. Like, have you ever dealt with any backlash when it comes to like, the system, or is it just like people are more understanding because, it happens so frequently? Like, I guess like what are some of the responses from the community side when it comes to like the team system?
So most of the time, obviously, since it's all on my avatars, I tend to have it so that if we're doing an event with another server, I tend to have it disabled for all of my people to even the playing field, just so that it's not our team has the advantage of being able to bomb each other without killing each other. Like you can't have someone with a flamethrower enter a room filled with their teammates, but when I'm doing my own events, I want it to be more relaxed. So, and especially you don't want your teammate to come up behind you and accidentally shoot you in the head, and now you have to wait for the next round in like 5 or 10 minutes. So it would be better to have it so that when you're playing as a team, you can't kill each other, and then it helps with they can keep each other's avatars on and have a diamond specifically above their teammates' heads, so they know, oh, I shouldn't shoot this guy. He's my teammate. I can see it above his head. And it also, another thing that helps is on specific avatars, I like to give them effects that they can give to their teammates. So on this one specifically, I have a little heal radius that I can heal my teammates in, but then if an enemy comes into it, they're not going to get the healing from it. Or, for example, another one I have is it will, on one of our tanks, it's a troop carrier. And if you're sitting on the tank or next to it, you'll get a defense buff as long as you're around the tank driver.
Fair. I mean, that's what's up. I mean, that's really cool that you've made different like buffs and stuff when it comes to that, and making sure they're, somewhat leveled to say the least. No, that's what's up though. I would say, because obviously, a lot of people do different things with the Avatar PvP system, especially with how many different franchises there are. There's so many franchises. Like if I had the time of day to name them all, we'd be here for at least an hour. But or at least all the different communities, I should say. But it's definitely a crazy thing how many people do amazing things with this system. A big shout out to Fluff. If you haven't seen Fluff's episode, go check out Fluff's episode. It'll probably be somewhere up here, probably. Post editor, make sure that's there. well, the thumbnail right here. But anyways, but it's definitely a crazy thing. Because obviously, there's so much when it comes to that. So I guess kind of one of the things I wanted to ask, because you kind of mentioned like, how you wanted to like edit your avatars and stuff. But what made you kind of want to like learn Unity in the first place? Like what kind of inspired you to create stuff? Like in VR chat, like what kind of drove that passion? Because obviously there's communities that use a lot of like pre-made assets from games, whatever case may be. But like, what made you want to full on pursue creation when it comes to like your stuff?
So it was mostly just I was spending a lot of time on VR chat with my friends, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool for there to be stuff in VR chat that's something I've made? And it's mostly just if I can say that I've done something and it's something that people enjoy, I think that make a lot of the time I've spent on it worth it.
I mean, yeah, no, I can't really think of anything else but agree with that, to be honest. Like that, it becomes a lot for a lot of people when it comes to that. But I think the payoff of making something for you or for your communities is amazing. I mean, let's be honest here. There's over, hundreds of worlds uploaded daily. There's, there's hundreds of thousands of, probably upon millions of avatars in VR chat, because obviously this game's been around for roughly 11 years now, and it's continued to just, grow and skyrocket, ever since. I just need a stonks meme right here. But it's definitely crazy to think about. Because obviously, you said you joined in roughly like 2019. Because so obviously you went through the the SDK2 era for a little bit, and you went through the SDK3 era. So did you start creating during the SDK2 era, or was it mainly an SDK3 era when you started creating stuff?
I did. I started creating stuff. This was before I even knew about Avatar PvP. I was in a group that used World PvP, so I thought, oh, I can just make an avatar and I don't need to add anything onto it. And at that point, I was still making stuff on SDK2. I think one of my first models was one of the troopers from Star Wars with a katana on its back, which is incredibly cringy thinking back on it now. But like 14, 15-year-old me, it was awesome thinking, I made this. It's got stuff that I did.
Nah, valid. I mean, to be fair, I feel like a lot of VR chat creators, no matter like what they do, they'll always look back at their previous content from years past and they'll be like, why did I do this?" Like I feel like that's a common thing, But yeah, that's what's up. Because obviously there's a lot of different things when it comes to Star Wars and the entire lore and everything. So I guess kind of one of the questions I want to ask, because obviously you do PvP events, that's kind of the whole shtick. But do you do anything that has any like relevancy to like the canon of Star Wars, or like do you hold like maybe canon events, or do you have like a role play side? I'm putting in air quotes, but do you have like a role play side of the community, or is it kind of just strictly like PvP?
So there is something I've been planning for a while. I've just got to get all of the stuff finished for it. And it's going to be essentially each person's server gets to pick a side, and it's going to be they'll control different planets, which will be all of our different worlds, and it'll be each team will compete to take each planet over, and there'll be story reasons behind all of it. In my server at the moment, I have a little channel where I post whenever I update an avatar. I'll make up a little reason for it. So I had an old flame trooper model, and I didn't like how the flamethrower was performing. So I made up joke on like Imperial technicians have been hard at work finding better ways to optimize your weapons. And it's whenever I come out with something new, or whenever I make something that I think can go there, or I'll post it in there. Just relevant stuff that I think they'll all enjoy, and obviously when the time comes, I'm going to use it to tell them how their battles against each other are all going.
Hell yeah. No, that's awesome. I'm definitely excited to hear more. Hello everyone, real quick, just want to pause the episode right here. If you want to support the podcast, feel free to check out the Noved Squad Hangout where I have all the creator economy stuff and all that stuff. But of course, if you're making sure to come back to check out some of the other episodes, might as well hit that subscribe button and make sure to join the group today because we have some amazing events that we're being showcased at that you don't want to miss. So make sure to join the group today. And of course, let's get back into the episode. Woo! But I guess, obviously, when it comes to, role play side of things, obviously it does take a lot of planning, rather than just getting a bunch of people together to, use guns and stuff to, PvP and whatnot. So it's kind of cool to hear that you guys are wanting to go in that direction, even if it's for only a little bit. So I guess kind of another question I want to ask, because obviously you have your matches, but do you have like any other events that you guys hold within your community?
So we do game nights on VR chat every so often. One of the people that hosts them the most is called Nagato, where we'll just go around to games like Gigas, or I forgot the name of the Ghost game where it's kind of like the Death Runs.
Spook 'em up.
I'll have to, yeah, that's it. So we'll go around, play a bunch of different games on VR chat. We have quite a lot of channels dedicated to different games. So at the moment, we have Helldivers, Repo, Peak, Phasmophobia. Basically anything that most people want to join. As long as there's quite a few people in the server with an interest in the game, I'll just make a roll, chuck a chat on there. Like here, now you guys can socialize about this game as well. And other than just that, we also do quite a few recruiting runs, which is a lot of groups will do it. They'll go out to different worlds in VR chat. They'll come up to you and they'll be like, I want you to join our group. And it does get annoying for some people, but one of our guys in our server, Dio, he's really good at recruiting people. He'll just walk up to them, he'll say like 5 words and they'll be immediately convinced. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when it comes to that, a lot of people have their own means of advertising, whether it's like a world dropped booth or a world dropped poster or stickers or prints, or just going into public lobbies as a group. Obviously, you have like the local police department, you have the Hapus, you have the Knuckles, you have all these communities. I know Helldivers, we had Josette on a previous episode. A lot of people have their own style of recruitment, which actually kind of goes into one of the next questions I was going to ask. Because obviously you guys were with Project Fest. You were an exhibitor at Project Fest this year, as you had mentioned previously. So I guess because I believe this is your first time exhibiting with them. So I guess from your perspective, what was it like to be a part of an event where you had a booth, and you were able to like showcase your community there?
It was pretty cool. I got to talk to people about it, and it would be, obviously there's tons of booths around, so all of the people that came to my booth would be people that were interested in it. So I'd just start talking to them about everything I've done, and it would be like a 25 minute long rant at them, and it was either, by the end, they'd either think, oh, that's cool, and join, or they'd think, you've just overwhelmed me with 50 years of information that I'm going to have to process. But I think my favorite part of it was actually surprisingly designing the booth, because despite there being a lot of limits on Quest, you still get quite a lot out of it. But I had to truly work around with the models to make the booth completely, and it's actually going to help because I have a model at the moment which has a deployable booth which is a lot less optimized than the one in the project world. And now I can switch them over so that I can have that project booth deployable anywhere in any world for many of my troopers, and I think that's awesome. And the opportunity to work on all of that was pretty amazing.
No, hell yeah. I mean, obviously, it's always funny because I make the joke of like, I blame Down Lyric for doing that. He's probably one of the first people. He's probably one of the first people that ever did that. He's the owner of the Traveling Circus. If you're not familiar, we had him on the podcast as well. But back in the day, when VRCon was still around, in 2022, he would go around in the VRCon worlds, and he would scout out like areas of booths that like weren't populated, but like the representatives were at, their booths, and he would plop down this giant, avatar, booth, and it would catch everybody's attention because the worlds were so like small, you could see from one end to the other. And ever since then, like more and more people have taken up the reins of, including myself, making a portable booth on their avatar. Big shout out Down Lyric. If you ever see this, hi Down Lyric. But it is really cool to see how many people are going that route, because I feel like that's one of the best ways of doing it. And especially now, funny enough, because obviously, back in the day, it was just Unity constraints. Well, now there's VRC constraints. And I actually talked about this, I believe, like 2 or 3 episodes ago. But now VRC Fury has its own world constraint system, and it's Quest compatible too. So it makes it a lot easier for like, booths like mine, or, maybe some of these other booths that are a little bit less optimized for Quest, and still having a chance to show something. It might not be the same shaders, but it just kind of depends. But it does work, and that, I feel like that's a huge step in the right direction for a lot of communities, when it comes to especially Quest communities, because now they have the chance to do that for Quest players. Because obviously with Quest being the dominant, platform when it comes to VR chat, obviously there's a lot of potential when it comes to Quest communities and, getting them into the scene, of like, PvP and, roleplay, whatever community. So, obviously, kind of to go back towards what we were talking about, because you talked about the, the recruitment style and stuff. So what worlds do you use for recruitment? Or typically
we typically the one I like to go to the most is actually Get Lost, because it's this huge forest, and a lot of the people going around there there's quite a lot of kids, but quite a few of the people I've seen around there are people like role playing and that sort of stuff. So they'll think, oh, I can do this role playing and also shoot people while I'm at it. And that was, and going off what you were saying about the Unity and VR chat constraints, that's when I made my booth. Once they made the VR chat constraints into the SDK, I thought, oh, this is something I can make. I had no clue that people had done this before. I thought, I can drop something down in the world. What if I drop down a little recruitment booth? And that's how I made it. So I try to make everything I have as Quest compatible as possible. I think the only thing that I don't have at the moment that I do have on some of my avatars on PC is there'll be scopes on some of the longer range guns, so like snipers, that unfortunately, because cameras don't work on Quest, you can't really make them work. But other than Get Lost, a few that I've seen my guys on is, I've seen them on, there's a Fallout inspired world, I'm not sure what it's called. It's another big open world, because what they'll like to do is they'll just set up shop somewhere with the placeable booth, and if anyone's interested, they'll walk over, they'll see, oh, there's a bunch of people over there. They're wearing matching outfits. I wonder what they're doing. And then anyone who isn't interested doesn't have to come over to us. I find it less intrusive than a lot of people I've seen recruiting. I don't have to run up to someone and be like, hey, do you want to join our group? Instead, we can just go nearby them. We can just set up our stuff. And then if they're interested from what they see, they can approach us. I feel like that's a much friendlier way of doing it.
Yeah, I'll say it. I guess a lot of it just depends on context. Because for me personally, before I switched over to the VRC Fury world drop, I used VRC constraints and before originally just Unity constraints. So unfortunately, at the time it was PC only. And obviously because I'm a content creator, it doesn't really matter what side I go to. Like, I'll find people interested. So I'll go to like random group publics and I'll just, randomly drop my booth, in a Great Pug or a Black Cat or, whatever popular worlds there are, that I can, at least have enough decent space to do so. Cause it is a pretty decent sized booth. It has 2 chairs, it has, the walls and everything. So it's hard to place it sometimes. At least make it look nice. So, but yeah, just kind of, being able to plop it down somewhere and people can come up to you rather than you going up to them. I could definitely see how more people would prefer it that way. I guess it ultimately just depends on the person at the end of the day, though. Because obviously, with VR chat as a platform, right? It is a social platform at the end of the day. So maybe some people would enjoy getting talked to like that. Some of them may not. It's just kind of once again, kind of up to the person. You know, so I guess kind of to move on from, recruitment side of things, because obviously, you guys have been around for a little bit now, and, where it stands right now after, Fest and starting to get into the fall season side of things, you guys are obviously, growing, definitely starting to get up there. I mean, you guys already have over 100 members, at least for your VR chat group, you do. So I guess, kind of to talk about, the growth and stuff, because obviously everyone started from zero. So what was kind of the mindset when you surpassed your first 100 members?
This is actually a really recent thing because our Discord actually just hit 100 members for the server, and my mindset for it is, if I can make it so that we have enough people to run our events without having to worry, if I can get it so that we have enough active people that we don't have to worry about cancelling events or anything, I think that's when I'll be happy with our goal. And at the moment we're at 100. Most of our events still run. Sometimes we have low times. At the moment, all 3 of our owners are busy, so I don't really have my headset working. One of our owners is on the other side of the planet, and one of them's applying for schools, so we have to hand that over to all of the NCOs, is what I call them, and they are running it pretty well this week. But obviously, that's quite a few of the people who are active aren't at the moment, and I want to make it so that even when those people are busy, but we can still host our events, we can have big battles, stuff like that, because you're not going to want to fight one other person in a huge open map. You're going to want tons of people, have it be like a all-out war. As long as you don't have no frames.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because obviously, at the end of the day, you want the community to thrive, even when you or your other owners are busy. That is a good sign. That's a very commendable thing for you guys. Especially when, because obviously, IRL comes first. You have to take care of your actual physical and mental health first. I mean, with VR chat, with being here since roughly, 2018, like 2017, 2018, I've seen communities come and go, just like a lot of people have. So, and a lot of it's usually stemming from IRL issues or whatever the case may be. So it is kind of cool to know that communities are kind of taking that extra step ahead and be like, hey, let's get enough, people on staff to where, like, if one of us goes down, somebody can at least be there to hold the reins while they're recovering or whatever the case may be. Um, so I guess kind of to go into that, when it comes to like your members and stuff. So when it comes to your events, how populated are your guys' events on a typical basis?
So most of our events at the moment will have 5 to 10 people. So it'll be about the size of say a team shooter game like Overwatch. Um, but on the higher side, I think we've had up to about 20 people, which means we can do 10v10. We can have vehicles going around. We can have boss battles, and I think everything's more fun with friends. So the more people there are, it's better. And I'm absolutely glad to have all of the people in my server who run my events for me whenever I'm not there or whenever Jaina isn't there. And just to say to them now, I'm grateful for all of you right now, because I think today they've got some events they're running for me while I'm doing this. And
Fair enough.
I couldn't be more grateful for them.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's what's up, man. I would say, because obviously, um, a lot of it, has to do with scheduling usually, when it comes to that type of stuff. Because obviously, I guess that's a good question to ask. When it comes to your community and stuff, do you have like a region centric, scheduling, or is it kind of open in the air? Because obviously, there's U.S. players, there's EU players, there's Asia players, Australia players, so on and so forth. So do you guys normally have like a consistent schedule based like on a specific region, or is it kind of just kind of open to whatever everybody's available to?
So I myself, I'm very British, but a lot of the people in my server are American, and maybe it's just because of the groups I've been in the past. I think if I made my own group, like when I first joined VR chat, it would have probably been British centric, but because of how long I've been in the groups which were based around American Eastern time, I've just adapted to that, and that's the times I work best with, because I've realized this. I stayed in America for a while not too long ago, and I realized that a lot of the times I was having for events would be times that when they were like eating dinner, and I'm like, how do you guys handle this? I do all of this at 10 or 11 at night. How are you lot handling getting on at 6 p.m. in the evening while you're going to go get like your sheets? So, but no, we focus mostly on US Eastern. It does help. There's a point in the year, twice every year, where daylight savings end. They end later for Americans and they start earlier. So there's 2 portions of time where there's only a 4-hour difference between me and the Eastern folk, and that just helps me amazingly because I don't have to stay up till midnight to tell these people to shoot each other.
No, yeah, it's definitely a wild thing when it comes to time zones. I mean, there's so many amazing communities over across seas, because obviously, as somebody who lives in America myself, like there's so many amazing communities out there and creators out there that, are across the ocean, and whether it's role play or PvP or music performers, whatever the case may be, there's so many talented individuals and communities across the globe, and it's very hard to find the time sometimes to go see them all. Especially somebody who's been around the front for a while. Because I mean, a lot of them I've had on my podcast, and I actually do work with from time to time. Whether it's me DJing at their events or whatever. But it's definitely good to have somewhat of an idealistic, either A, you have an idealistic time that's good for everybody, or B, you have kind of a variety of schedules. So you have like maybe some EU time based events, some NA time events, whatever the case may be. It really ultimately depends on who's on your staff, who's available to do what, which is a lot of work in its own right. Right, like it's definitely a crazy thing.
think it definitely helps. A lot of the British people I've met on here are just as sleep deprived as I am, so they're all willing to get up in the middle of the night and just start blasting people.
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, yeah, man. I would say, I guess kind of one of the final questions I wanted to ask, because obviously, you know, you are a growing community at the end of the day, and you guys are, constantly improving what you guys are doing. So I guess kind of one of the things I wanted to ask, when it comes, because you kind of mentioned like the role play stuff a little bit, but like, what are some of your plans to like improve like your community, like to essentially outward grow your community?
So one of the things I'm doing at the moment is I'm updating all of my older models that I have because quite a few. The group is 50-50 between some of my older models and some of my newer ones. At the moment, I'm updating all of my old ones, which have my older friendly fire system where you have to fist bump them. I'm updating it to a newer one, which places a world constraint at the world origin. I don't know how I figured out how to do that, but it places a world constraint at the origin of the world and then moves the contact up and down based upon what team you click on. So whenever the contacts hit each other, it teams you both together. And I think that would be one of the best improvements because it makes it a lot more accessible for people. Another thing I want to do to grow the group is just make more models for them. If people have more variety in the weapons they use, they're going to be more likely to enjoy it and stay for longer.
I mean, that's really cool. The fact that you're coming up with so many ideas when it comes to like avatar stuff and upgrading some of the systems. So obviously, because you guys have started semi recently, I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask for anybody who's interested in like making a community, like a PvP community or a Star Wars community, what's one piece of advice that you could give for somebody who's maybe wanting to like create one of those communities?
So the main piece of advice I'd give them is that don't give up on what you're doing. When I originally created my server, so it technically has two start dates. One of them is May of, I think it's May of 2024, but then when I actually opened the server was January of 2025. There was a long time where it had maybe 5-6 people when I was still working on everything, and I would say don't give up on what you're doing because it may seem to start small, but if you've been around long enough, if you know enough people, you've got people who will want to join you. Especially if it's something you've done before in the past, you'll have people who will like it, and as long as you just keep I'd say the pressure on, but it's not really that much of a pressure. But if you keep moving forward with what you're doing, it's going to succeed in the end. So my main advice would just be don't give up with what you're doing because you can make anything in this game.
No, 100%. I always make the joke of like, not really a joke, but I always make the statement of, this VR chat platform is literally infinite possibility, within reason. I gotta always say that within reason. Um, but you can practically do anything when it comes to world and avatar creation. Once again, within reason. I gotta always say that. But it's definitely infinite possibility when it comes to this platform, especially bringing people closer together and enjoying their passions and hobbies. It's definitely a wild thing. um but yeah, dude, Jason, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was actually really nice to kind of learn a little bit more about your community and a little bit about how you got started.
Dad, so thank you for having me here, and it was nice to share my story of how I started and everything I'm working on.
Yeah, of course. Before we do end things off, I do want to give you a spot to kind of tell the audience where they can find you in your community, and all the links on screen in the description. But yeah, feel free to take it away.
So we have a VR chat group. It's called the Ashen Empire. If you look for me in VR chat, my name's Jason2005. It's spelt weirdly. I'll get the editor to put it on screen somewhere. And just put that name in. You'll see the group there. Just join there. We have a Discord. If that link goes below, you can join there. And it's not that difficult to get into. It's literally just you join the server, you verify to make sure that you're not a bot to steal everyone's accounts, and then someone will get around here and then they'll teach you how to do all of the avatar PvP.
Hell yeah. And of course, all the links will be down in the description as well. So please make sure to go check them out. The Discord, the VR chat group, all that stuff. But yeah, ladies, gentlemen, everybody inside and outside the ballpark, this has been it for episode 77. Yes. Of the Noved Notes podcast. I want to thank you all so much for watching, listening, depending on what platform you're on. Comment down below, what's your favorite Star Wars movie? Fuck it. That's the question this time. What's your favorite Star Wars movie?
If it's not number 3, you're wrong.
But yeah, comment down below what's your favorite Star Wars movie. And of course, if you're already coming back to check out some of the other episodes, why not hit that subscribe button or like button, depending on what platform you're on. Ring that bell, all that type of stuff. But yeah, I want to thank you all one last time for watching, listening, depending on what platform you're on. And I will see you in the next episode. Take care and peace. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Noved Notes.